This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. I'm TK Kerstetter with Corporate Board Member, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our program today that's going to talk about the board education conundrum. It's a word that I've always wanted to use in the title, and I finally found an appropriate topic to use that. So joining me to discuss this topic today is Mike Ryan, who's the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Board Services for Corporate Board Member. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, TK, for having me.
Well, the first thing I want to do is sort of recap. So in June, in this area of board education, Corporate Board Member and the NYSE launch a board education program available for all public companies and private companies that gives one the ability to enroll for one low flat fee, enroll all the directors to be able to come to every event that's director related that's held by the corporate board member. In 2012, that's probably going to be about 40 events if you count the webinars and everything that's included. The other thing it does is sort of gives the ability for a company to be proactive and disclose that it is making this program available for its directors. So, Mike, you know, this has been going on since June. What have you sort of seen so far in this space?
Well, I've seen a few things. First, when I'm talking with companies, typically the general counsel or the corporate secretary, and with directors, there's a real emphasis on substance. I recently had a general counsel say to me that he did not want to send a director to an event with a big name partner from a law firm to talk about the responsibilities of directors after Dodd-Frank and having to worry about risk management. The directors understand that. They want to know how to deal with these issues and get into some detail and some specifics. So substance is really the name of the game. Flexibility is also very important for directors. Across the board, they're very, very busy. They want to be able to experience that educational content in different ways and at the time that's most convenient for them. For every company, for every department, and every company that does not exclude the Office of the Corporate Secretary, cost is also of a concern. Coming out of the financial crisis, this is a big issue for every company, and it continues to be. So companies are looking for substantive, flexible, cost-effective programs. The one area that I think is interesting and starting to hear more about is the opportunity for companies to get out there and get credit for the work that they're doing in the area of board education. So looking for opportunities for greater disclosure and greater communication to investors around this area.
Well, you can say that, and I'm sure there's some questions, but I can tell you in last year's proxy that certainly wasn't the case. I'll bet you I looked at some 200 proxies of public companies, and I didn't see in any of those proxies that anybody at all discussed continuing education. So, and I know that people took advantage of it, but I guess when the attorneys get a hold of those things, they dumb those down to the basic foundational level of what they're going to put in the proxy.
Well, I think you're right, and I actually recently attended an event that was honoring governance professionals for the work that they've done over the last year or so, and one of the categories was the best proxy statements. And when I went through the proxy statements that were nominated, you're absolutely right, the disclosure around board education was virtually non-existent. I think the reason for that has been that historically the focus around board education has been at the director level, and even the SEC's new rule, or relatively new rule adopted in 2009, focuses on the experience and qualifications of individual directors. And as you mentioned, lawyers, when they get involved, and even I think directors themselves, are not going to be in a position where they're sort of pitting one director against the other and making one director look better than the other because that director maybe attended more educational programs than the rest of the board. So they're not going to allow that type of disclosure. So I think what we're going to see a shift toward is more of a company focus, and the program that we have here at Corporate Board Member is making that shift as well. While we're certainly going to be focused on providing educational opportunities to individual directors, offering that to the company at the company level, I think is going to be very important. So the company and the board as a whole could say, here's what we're doing around the area of board education, and with that, I think you'll see better disclosure.
Well, Corporate Board Member certainly supports any education is good education. That's certainly the case. But it's interesting, on this show we had Pat McGurn on, and the fact that no one mentioned continuing education, their proxy did not go unnoticed by the ISS. And they have sort of stepped away from the business, but it is still important to realize that particularly, Pat said, with retirees, that here's a group that is out of the day-to-day flow of going into work, and in his mind, investors want to know what are they doing to keep current. So that has not, the ISS has, maybe stepped away, but not gone away.
Yes, and I think it's important to stress that ISS did make this change several years ago in not considering board education and director education as part of their analysis for rating companies. Their new grid system no longer considers that as a factor. And I guess I would argue that's been mostly a good development because it allows companies to move away from sort of a check-the-box approach to governance, to education, and be more focused on substance. As you know, there are roughly 38,000 individuals that serve on public company boards in the United States. So that represents a wide range of experiences and qualifications, and therefore the educational needs of those directors are very, very different if you go from sort of one extreme to the other. I think the shift here is going to be a positive development, but it does really require the SEC, the companies to become more focused on the disclosure and getting out there and telling their story.
Yeah. Well, I hope you're right on the interest about telling their story. Right now, what's sort of invisible to the investor is all of the work that's done on the in-house programs. And there are some companies and some corporate secretaries that do a very thorough job on educating their boards on what they need to do to perform their duties. Now, it doesn't give the benefit of having that peer exchange and learning from your peers, which I think is valuable, but there just is not a format for anybody to disclose that. But I'm not sure why you couldn't. I'm not sure why you couldn't come out and say how active a program you have in-house.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I think you're right that companies generally do a very good job in the area of board education, and that includes in-house programs and the use of third-party programs. And it's the biggest challenge probably really is getting out and telling their story. And as I said a few moments ago, I think the focus has really been sort of at the individual director level, and they need to kind of take a second look at this and look at the opportunity before they get into the experience and qualifications of individual directors. Maybe include in the proxy statement a few sentences up front about what the company does to make sure that their board is informed and educated around the issues that are critical to them. And then that disclosure it can be transported. It can be taken to the investor relations website. It can be taken to other communications with investors and others that might be interested in what the company is doing in this area. Well,
companies certainly can be more proactive than I think they're being today, and it's got to serve them well to do that. So I think that's one of the takeaways that I think at least should be.
Well, that's especially true when they're doing a good job already.
Yeah, especially that. Mike, you have the opportunity to attend the corporate governance events, the corporate secretaries events, the investor relations events, so you have the chance to interact with these people that are in the trenches. So Knowing that, what sort of trends do you think are going to happen in 2012 in this space?
Well, I guess I go back to what I said at the very top of the program, and that was it's about substance. So clearly the core programs around things like compensation committees and audit committees are going to be important, but I think other strategically important discussions are going to be important in education around those and providing information. So that ranges from risk management to succession planning, board evaluation, strategic planning. Those types of things I think are going to increasingly become important for director education programs. And then along with that, what we've just been talking about is companies getting their story out, describing what they're doing, making investors aware of what they're doing. So, but I'd be interested in turning that around on you and sort of getting your reaction and your view on what might be coming down the pike.
Well, my first reaction in this whole space, well, first of all, we got to find a better word for other than board education. Mm-hmm. The word education sort of connotates a school kind of thing that you don't know anything. I mean, these people are well educated and versed on this. They're trying to be informed. Now, I don't know what that other word is, but that would be the first thing that comes to my mind. Second of it is, I'm amazed at how overwhelmed the directors are and the number of providers that now provide board education. It is a cluttered mess at times, okay? Mm-hmm. You may get multiple emails in a single day, and how do you as a corporate secretary or as a board member sort through, what has value, what's not, how you deal with that. So I really think it's a cluttered space, and it's a challenge for people to do that. All that being said, I think because of the clutter and because of the concern, I think you're going to see more in-house programs that are supplemented by chances for directors to do peer kind of things, because our experience is that those are the best takeaways. The highest satisfaction levels from the directors are ones where I can learn from my peers on what they're doing, so that they're great takeaways. So that's sort of my observations about 2012. So, well, listen, Mike, it's going to be an interesting year, and we'll have to see. That assumes that nothing else comes down the pike. That will be exciting, but we appreciate that you would join us on the show today.
Having me again.
And that will conclude this edition of This Week in the Boardroom. We hope that you have found it informative, and we welcome you back next week when we'll take a look at another critical issue that will help you be a better board member or a better committee member. And we will see you then.
Join us again next week for This Week in the Boardroom, brought to you by corporate board member and host NYSE Euronext, along with governance knowledge partner Paul Weiss and contributing partners National Investor Relations Institute and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.